Hello, my name is Kim and welcome to the Embroidered Elephant channel. Today I am going to be filming podcast number 23, I believe. So this is for all of the projects that I did over the month of May. So how have you all been? I have been relatively busy, but I have been better than I have been. I've been a bit less stressed, particularly at work, and I have been trying to do things to make my life a bit easier and make it a little bit less stressful. I don't know about you guys, but I find it quite easy to get into the habit of waking up, having breakfast, going straight to work. Sometimes I have a lunch break, sometimes I don't. Then I come home, I can't be bothered to do anything, so I sit on the sofa and I watch TV, and it's just, I feel as though I never have the time to do anything that I want to do. So what I have started doing instead is I wake up a bit earlier in the morning, and I will make myself a coffee, make myself some breakfast, and I will sit on our little balcony with my feet up, sometimes with a blanket if it's really cold, and just read my book. And I think I've probably mentioned this before, or I've probably said something similar before. I'm in quite a privileged position because I don't have children and I have the ability to wake up a bit earlier and just concentrate on myself and have the time and the space to sit on my balcony and read for a bit. And I appreciate not everyone's like that. Some people get up early to go to work and they get home and they're knackered, 12-hour plus days. Some people have children, which is a privilege in itself, but you might not have the ability to sit quietly and read or crochet or do something that you want to do. And again, when I'm getting home from work, rather than just sitting in front of the TV, again, I tend to sit on my balcony and either bullet journal. I love sort of planning and things like that, tracking the books that I want to read, reading reviews, or just reading some more books, or crocheting, or just doing something that's 9 times out of 10 not on the internet because it's just all consuming. And yeah, it's just really, I can tell that it's made quite a big impact on my mood. I feel like I've got more time during the day. My whole day isn't just taken up by work, which is nice. Along with that, I've also got some more colleagues in the office, which means that it's just changed the dynamic that I work in, which is great, in a good way, because it means that I've got someone with me a majority of the day. So I've got someone I can talk to, someone I can bounce ideas off, I can share responsibility of the work with, and yeah, it's just much nicer. So in terms of work and my sort of day-to-days, it's been really good, really positive. I'm feeling quite positive, which is nice. I have also started to crochet a little bit more recently. You will see that I've released a few videos about different kits that I've completed or different projects that I've started. One series that I am going to start doing and hopefully continue for a while, or until for a while, is that I am going to be crocheting my books. So far this year I have finished around 46 books so far, and I've thought every now and then it would be really cool to crochet different motifs or different important factors of the book, just so that I have a little memory of them, and it's something nice to do, and it's something to show off my slightly obsessive tendency with reading at the moment. And it's just something different that I can do. As well as that, I'm using stash yarn, so it's also a way for me to start using more yarn and getting through my stash, because this year so far I haven't really used that much of it, if any. yeah, which is a slight problem because, yeah, I've got quite a lot of yarn. So the plan is to crochet different things from my book, whether it's a character or a symbol or just basing it on the colours or something, using stash yarn. So using my stash, I'm crocheting more as well, and it ties the two different themes together. So hopefully that should be interesting. I've released the first video and I have recorded a second. I will edit and upload it in the next couple of weeks, but I will be showing you the project, so spoiler alert. And apart from that, yeah, I've been crocheting a bit. My partner went over, or my husband went to France a couple of weeks ago, and I stayed here because he was having a boys' weekend, which is really nice. And I spent the weekend just sewing and eating when I wanted to, going to bed way too late, and just having creative time. And I really enjoy sometimes not speaking to anyone. My work is in healthcare and I love my work. However, when you're speaking to people all day and then you come home and you're speaking to different people on the phone, friends, family, which again I love, sometimes it's just nice to have a bit of a break and just not have to speak to anyone. It's just, I find that nice, and I find that helps me reset. But yeah. Apart from that, I don't think I've got any big life updates. I'm just taking along, trying to get crocheting a little bit more, definitely reading a lot more, continuing that trend. And yes, one thing that I wanted to raise, or one thing that I wanted to ask, is I have been doing, I think I've done 3 videos so far about all of the books that I've read. So starting from 0 to 10, I think the first one was, and then 11 to 20, 21 to 30, etc. Just going through each of the books that I've read and going through the sort of the synopsis and what I enjoyed about it, what I didn't. The videos haven't done as well as some of my other videos, so what I am contemplating doing, I've got another video to catch up, so that I will do book number 31 to 40, and then I think what I'll do, instead of releasing a separate video going through each of the books, I might just talk about each of the books in the podcast as I'm showing you the squares. And then every 3 months or so I'll just do a big sort of blanket reveal, I guess. Yeah, and see how you find that. I think that for me would be preferable, maybe more engaging as well, especially because I'm not really doing a lot of projects outside of the squares many months. So it may be that podcasts are a little bit longer, but hopefully it'll be more interesting than a separate video about just all of the books I've read, especially because I have quite an eclectic taste. So they're not all action, they're not all romance, they're a bit of everything. So yeah, I thought that might make more sense. So after the next video that I will be recording, I will be going through all of the books separately. So I'm going to go through each of the books that I've read in this video, along with the showing you the granny squares and a side-by-side view of each of the books next to the granny squares. But I am just going to film a video to bridge the gap between the two. And apart from that, as I said, I will be going through each of the books in my podcasts. And then in between that, I will just be doing separate crochet related content or sewing related content. So yeah. Anyway, let's get started on my finished projects. So project number 1 is this little guy here. So this was a kit by Knitty Critters. It's a pouch pal. His name was Peter the bunny. You can probably guess where that inspiration's come from. Now, I find him really cute. I don't know exactly what I will be doing with him. I think he'll just sit on my desk for a while until I find a better cause for him. But yeah, he was really quite simple to do. I don't think there was anything that was particularly difficult at all, really. The positioning of his feet aren't perfect, but apart from that, there's not really anything to note. The instructions were really clear. The process didn't take too long. If you do want some more information about that, I did do a separate video specifically about the process of crocheting him. So again, if you are interested in the process, the yarn, how long it took me, etc., have a look at that video, because off the top of my head I can't remember. It was quite a few weeks ago that I recorded it. I will link him below. I will say, although the yarn was splitty, it was a bit difficult at times to make sure all the yarn was on the hook and that I wasn't missing anything, and I did have to go back and recrochet a few things, like a few stitches, which was annoying, don't get me wrong. But apart from the yarn, and I think that's a feature with a lot of recycled cotton yarn, the kit was really, really good. It was really clear. I don't think there was anything that was even remotely unclear. It had pictures of the front and the back to show the positioning of different features, and it didn't take too long. I think for a beginner this is a really good kit. Again, the only drawback is the yarn, but apart from that it was perfect. It had a stitch marker, which a lot of kits don't. It had a crochet hook, which was a good one as well, not just a metal one. It had one with a grip on it as well, and yeah, the instructions were clear. So finished object number 1, Pete the bunny. The next finished object is this crow. So again, if you are subscribed to my channel, you may have already seen this crow. This is based on a pattern from Ravelry. It's called the Cuervo Crow, which I think is Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, unfortunately, so I'm probably butchering that. And it is by Luna Lana Handmade. It is a free pattern, again available on Ravelry. I will link it below. This pattern was really good, and I crocheted this to be based on the book Hex, which I absolutely loved. Again, I talk more about it in the book. So this was based on one of the main characters. The yarn I used was Toft Charcoal DK yarn. I would say that it would look more defined if it was made out of cotton, but I wanted to use the yarn that I already had, and this looked like a nice colour rather than just plain black. I don't know how well you can see this. So the pattern itself was really good. There wasn't really anything difficult about it. The only difficult thing, I think, for me personally, was the bottom. So there was a round on the pattern that said to increase and then go in the back loop only. What I should have done is paid more attention to the pattern. The reason that it was back loop only was to create sort of a little round part on his bum or her bum so that it sits up properly. So what I had to do after I finished, it would not stand up, surprisingly. So I had to surface crochet a circle so that it would stand up. It doesn't necessarily stay up, which isn't the best, but she's really cute. I added these little button eyes because I thought it gave more character. And one good thing about this pattern is the head comes off, so you can change the direction that it's looking in, which just makes it feel a little bit more animated, I guess. Yes, there was a little bit of sewing in, so you sewed the wings and the tail on, and the beak and obviously the eyes. But apart from that, it wasn't complicated. Again, if you want a more in-depth review of the pattern, I did do a video based on the crocheting of this, and I have got the time again on there that it took me to make it. The only thing that I would say I'm not overly a massive fan of, I guess, firstly the fact that it doesn't stay up, but that is my fault. And I did have to wet block it as well, because the wings, I don't know how well you can see, the wings and the tail are crooked. So I think that's just where the yarn is sort of, maybe I crocheted a little bit too tight or too loosely or something, but it does flick to the side, which I did block it, and it meant that the wings sit flat to the body rather than sort of spraying out, which is perfect. But the tail is still a bit wonky, but no one's really going to pay that much attention to its tail, I don't think. But yeah, apart from this was the first project I did for Crochet My Book with me. As I said, Hex is such an amazing book. I really enjoyed it, so I was really happy to find a pattern that represented the book so well. Again, I'm not quite sure where I'm going to put her. I might look at putting a shelf in my room and then just collect the little amigurumi creatures and little things that I make, especially towards the Crochet My Book series with me, so that I can have them all sort of lined up. I am crocheting stuff in no particular order whatsoever. It's just when I find something inspiring, I will then crochet it and just see where that goes. So that was the second finished project. Again, I used stash yarn for that. It wasn't part of a kit, and the buttons I used were again just what I had around the office. I didn't use that much yarn. I didn't actually weigh how much yarn I used, I don't think. But the pattern says it uses under 20 grams, so I'm going to go with that. It really wasn't a lot of yarn, so yeah, I'm really bad at keeping a log of what I'm using at the moment, and I'm just not crocheting enough to keep an eye on it, so unfortunately I haven't got those numbers. But on to the next project that I did. If you are likely to watch the series, this will be a spoiler for you. This is the second project I made for the Crochet My Book with me. So I had this idea in my head that I'd seen it quite a lot online, and what I really wanted to do was crochet a bookmark in the shape of a coffee cup. So this is the top, this is a coffee cup, and this is for the book Before the Coffee Gets Cold, which is quite well known, I think. For this I followed a YouTube tutorial, which I don't usually do. It was really good. Again, I will link this below. So this is the coffee cup. I didn't really have any dark brown yarn that was DK weight, so I used this very, very light yarn. So there is a difference in colour, it's just not very obvious. And then from the end, crochet, crochet, crocheted, and then I made this little coffee bean. So I did look for quite a while to find some tutorials to make a coffee bean. It was really difficult. I don't know if it's just maybe people haven't thought the same idea, or whether I couldn't find it, or I don't know. A lot of the tutorials had crochet tea bags on the end, which is great. But before the coffee gets cold, obviously you want it to be coffee. That was sort of the idea that I had in my head. So this pattern I did just freestyle. It wasn't complicated. And then obviously because it is very, very light, I just sort of embroidered a little S, a little coffee bean shape on the top. And then this is all chain crochet. The white yarn that I used, this is made completely from cotton, so the white yarn that I used was from hobby, and it is the 4/8 yarn, I think, and the brown yarn that I used is from Rickarimi. So yeah, and the way that this works is very, very simple. So the coffee cup sits on the top of the book, and then the coffee bean comes out the bottom. So then obviously finding your page is fairly easy. So it doesn't bother me too much that the yarn in the middle doesn't sit straight. It doesn't bother me at all. I haven't used it that much because I've been aware of keeping it in good condition so that I can show you and so that I can take pictures, etc. However, the only thing that I'm a bit conscious of is making sure that neither of the bits sort of get ripped off, because the way it's attached probably isn't the best. So yeah, I just want to make sure it doesn't get broken. But I'll just make sure I'm not too rough with it in my book, or in my bag even. So again, I have recorded a video for that, and if you want more specific details and how long it took me, I believe off the top of my head it only took me about an hour, just less than an hour, and that included sort of searching for the patterns and freestyling the bottom part as well. I'm quite happy with it. It didn't take long, it was really easy, as I said. I will upload the video in the next couple of weeks, so if that's something you're interested in watching, keep an eye out. And yeah, I'll have more details in there about the pattern, my process, my thoughts, etc., and about the book as well. So although it's a small finished object, this is also a finished project, and it's a little bit of yarn out of my stash. A little bit out of like millions, don't get me wrong, but still a little bit of yarn out. So going through the crochet granny squares that I made based on the books that I finished this month, because I've done videos up to square number 30, I will be starting from 31. So this will include 2 books from April. The rest will be books only from the month of May. Going forwards, it will be that in the podcast I will only cover the book squares that were from that month. Hopefully that makes sense. And that is when I finish the book and not necessarily when I finish the square. Sometimes I finish the square before I finish the book, or vice versa. So yeah. So book number 31. This is the granny square I made for it. And this is for the book Nerve. And this is for the book Nerve by Jeanne Ryan. And I read this book between the 12th of April and the 19th of April, and I gave it 4 stars in total. I read this book whilst I was away, and it was really hard to put down actually. It was quite short and engaging. So the book is based on the main character V. Put very basically, she starts an online game of dares, and it is controlled by some unknown organisation, and the dares get increasingly more embarrassing or more dangerous until she is selected to go to the ultimate sort of dares in a room with some other winners from around the country. So it's really engaging. It's sort of semi-futuristic but not really. There's big prizes included, so that, as I said, very recommended if you're into sort of action books, I guess. And this is the book next to the book cover. Book number 32 was Family Torn Apart by Cathy Glass. This was a book I read between the 24th and the 28th of April, and I rated it 3.25 stars. So this is about, if you haven't read any Cathy Glass books before, Cathy Glass is a foster carer, and in this book she takes in Angie and Polly, so 6 and a 4-year-old, after their sister alleges abuse by the children's father and the sister's stepfather. Hopefully that makes sense. The book is about the effects of the trauma on the family, the girls, and it's trying to get to the bottom of what's actually happening. So firstly, when you hear an allegation like that, you assume that it is true. However, there's some things that come out that make it less likely to have happened, until eventually we get to the end of the book where it's, did it happen or did it not? It comes to a good conclusion. This book is it's fairly easy reading if you're interested in sort of true crime, true life stories. It didn't take me too long to get through. So this was a book that I listened to on audiobook. It was quite easy to listen to and get to the sort of read it. I'm quite interested in true crime. Again, things, stories about abuse and true life things are quite interesting to me. So this book was quite interesting, and again, it was quite quick to get through. I will say that there were some scenes where not a lot was happening. It read a bit more like a diary entry about what the girls were eating or doing, rather than something happening. But that is what happens in foster care. It's not always go, go, go and, you know, trauma dump, you know, true crime, this assault's taken place, this allegation, la la la. It is sometimes a bit slower. But I did quite enjoy that, and I will be reading more of her books in the future. So this is the square by the side of the book cover that it was based on. The colours weren't overly representative, but I had to pick out little details that I could get colours from. The next book, or the first book that I finished in May, was this one. So it is the book Hunchback by Saou Ichikawa. I'm very sorry, I'm probably not pronouncing that name right, apologies. So this was a book that I saw in a charity shop. It was a small book, and the synopsis just intrigued me. So it is about a woman, Shaka, who has a congenital muscle disorder. So she lives in a care home, and she writes stories online for an erotic website. She proposes an indecent act to her male carer, and it's just about sort of her life. So although the beginning of the book is quite spicy, reading about Shaka's experiences with her disabilities, being in a wheelchair, needing sort of a suction tube down her throat to make sure that she can still breathe properly. It's really interesting from an able-bodied person's perspective, because it's something that I've obviously never experienced. And although there are scenes in there that are a bit erotic by the nature of the book, the parts about Shaka's thoughts and her wishes, you know, things that she wished she could do if she were a normal abled body, it's just really interesting. I found it quite intriguing, and the detail she gave about her life and how it's that much different, and just different things she needs to think about in her day-to-day life, just made it really enjoyable. This book, I gave it a 3-star, again just with a warning that it is quite spicy in scenes, but yeah, very enjoyable. So this is the book cover, and this is the square that I made. I do find this one really representative, which sometimes not all of them are, just based on obviously using yarn that I already have. I'm not buying any special yarn, that would cost a fortune, but yeah. Book number 34 was Kiss Kiss by Roald Dahl. I started it on the 26th of April and I finished it on the 5th of May, and I gave this one 4 stars. So this is a collection of stories by Roald Dahl, and they are horror / mystery adult stories. So for example, there's a few different stories, one of which is Mrs. Bixby in the Colonel's Coat. I really liked that one. Yeah, I can't really explain much about it without giving away the ending. Yeah, I quite liked that one. There was one called Pig. Just really interesting. I grew up reading Roald Dahl, so seeing that he had collections of short adult stories, again, really intrigued me. I bought the book while I was in Italy, actually, because I'd finished the book that I took, which was Nerve, and I was looking for something else to tide me over for the evenings when it was a little bit more quiet, or whilst we were out sitting in parks, on benches, etc. So yeah, the book itself was really enjoyable. It was really easy reading. There was only one story that I didn't quite understand the ending of, so I'm going to get my dad to read it and see if he can explain it in simple terms what the ending meant. But apart from that, yeah, they were just really entertaining. There were, because it was written quite a while ago, it's not recent, if that makes sense. So there are a few things that are sort of from a while ago. I don't want to say the olden days because I don't want to offend anyone, and I don't know how old the books are, so I don't want to offend anyone. There are a few things in there that are a bit more old school, put it like that. But there wasn't anything that I didn't understand. There was just one story I didn't quite get the sort of the drop at the end. I didn't understand what the big sort of bombshell was. But again, that might just be my understanding rather than the story itself. But yeah, I would really recommend, and I'm going to buy some more of his books, his collections to read through. And this is the cover by the side of the granny square. So this was one of the covers that I found it a little bit more tricky to pick out some colours on, just because the colours I had weren't really representative of the cover. The next book I read, book number 35, is named Hex, and it is by Jenni Fagon, and it's a short story. I borrowed this from the library, and I read this between the 6th and the 7th of May, and I gave it 4.5 stars. So this is the book that I based my crochet crow on. So it's a short book, well recommended. Story of a witch, Gables Duncan, who's set to be hung in the morning. Iris is another witch who comes to see her, meets her to provide her comfort. So they draw parallels between how women are treated now and how they were treated during the witch sort of hunt season during the 16th century. So it's really interesting as a woman to read it, because when I initially think about it, I think that 16th century and nowadays women have it so much better. But again, there are a lot of parallels. Arguably, they do. But it's just very, very interesting to see the parallels or hear the parallels between the two, just based on their understanding of each other and the struggles that women go through now and women went through then. And it's just, yeah, it's just, I read a review that labelled this as feminist rage material, and I do completely get it, and I'm struggling to find a better way of describing it, and I think that is well described in the nicest way, so not in a negative way. It gives you a feminist point of view about women's rights, and yeah, it was just a really enjoyable book. You feel so sorry for Gables, the main character, and you support obviously Iris being there and supporting Gables in her time of need. So yeah, so this is the book cover compared to the granny square that I made. This was again quite easy. It only had 2 colours on it, so it wasn't overly difficult to do. Book number 36 was The Year of Living Danishly by Helen Russell. This one I gave 4 stars. I started it on the 28th of April and I finished it on the 8th of May. As it says on the title, this is a book about a woman who went to live in Denmark for a year. Her husband got a job offer over there and she was umming and ahhing about it. Then she thought, why not? And a lot of the book is about the comparison between living in the UK and how we have a big focus on working and how we see productivity, stress, etc. And a lot about the work-life balance compared to how people in Denmark see it. And it's just a different way of living, and her experience, obviously I've never lived in Denmark, so I can't say that, I can't verify this, but her experience is that living in Denmark is a lot less stressful. The way that they view things is just quite eye-opening for a woman who came from England. And she also helpfully, at the end, she shares some good tips on how to live more Danishly in the UK or without moving to Denmark. So things such as putting in stricter boundaries at work, doing more work that you enjoy rather than doing it just for the money, spending more time with family, having more games nights, finding hobbies, etc., looking after yourself physically. So lots of tips that she shares in order to support you to live more Danishly without moving to Denmark. And really nicely, each of the chapters is based on a month. So each month she writes a different chapter, and that is a nice way of sort of splitting up the chapters and organising the book as well. So I would very much recommend it. I don't think that she's done a lot of books since. I think that was the main one that interested me. It was a present from my dad. But yeah, it was really interesting to read and just see how different cultures view things, such as what it means to have a good work, what it means to have a good work-life balance, etc. So yeah, again, if I didn't say so before, it was 4 stars. So this is the book cover, and this was the granny square that I made. Book number 37 is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. I gave this book 3 stars and I read it between the 8th and the 11th of May. So this is a book about Kareed, who supports her serial killer sister Ayula to cover up her crimes. Ayula starts dating Kareed's workplace crush, and it's a book about their relationship, how far you're willing to go to protect your family, and what Kareed puts up with to sort of look after her little sister. So it's very interesting. It is about true crime, but it's also a lot about their relationship together. It can be a little bit frustrating at times because you think, why is she doing all of this to support her sister? But take a step back. Family's family, I guess. Not that I've ever covered up any crimes for my siblings, but you know, I'm not saying I wouldn't. So this is the book cover, and this is the square that I made. I think that these colours are quite representative of the colour of the cover. I didn't want to just do it black and green because that would be quite boring. So the greys and the changing gradients worked quite well, I think. So book number 38 was named Consent, and it is by Vanessa Springora. She is French, and this book was translated from French into English. This is the story about Vanessa's grooming by a well-known French author. He was well known at the time. The abuse was well known at the time. It wasn't just her that he groomed into being in a relationship with him. There was a big age gap. It was apparently well known that he was more interested in younger people, and it wasn't prevented. So this is her opportunity, or this is her chance to sort of come out and make it more well known and take back some control. And it's quite interesting, her writing it from an adult perspective, because at the time she was a child when she was groomed. So obviously she had a different perspective on the relationship as she does now, being an adult and reflecting on it. This was the book cover, and this was the granny square that I made. If I didn't say, I gave this book 2.5 stars, and I read it between the 11th and the 14th of May. Book number 39, Almost Adulting by Arden Rose. I read this book between the 14th and the 18th of May, and I gave it 2 stars. So this is a book that says on the cover it's a guide to being an adult, basically, or words to that effect. I found that this book was more so about her experiences and sharing advice rather than being a guide on what to do. It came across as slightly more of a biography about Arden and, again, her experiences, rather than being a guide for teenagers or young adults. I would say, yeah, it's less of a self-help guide, more her experiences. Not terrible, but not totally memorable either. So a little bit forgettable. That's why it's 2 stars. Book number 40 was Open Throat by Henry Hoke. So I read this book between the 19th and the 20th of May, and I gave this one 2 stars. So I have an app where I note all of the books that I'm reading. I add them to different lists, and I can share them with friends, family, etc., so that we can keep an eye on what each other recommends, what we're reading, what we're interested in, etc. And I saw a recommendation from another user that said that Open Throat was a really, really good book. I read the synopsis and it just really intrigued me, so I bought the book. I bought it secondhand, but it still wasn't the cheapest book I bought. I think it was about £5, not including delivery, which compared to new is probably a bargain, but again, more than I usually spend on books, especially secondhand ones. It was an easy read. It had short chapters. It was interestingly written. So it was a book based on a mountain lion who lived under the Hollywood sign, and just his reflections on the way that people live and what they find important and how they live their lives, and just obviously seeing it from an outside perspective, it was really eye-opening and intriguing to see what we deem as normal and seeing it from an outside perspective. So he reflects a lot on human actions and mankind and what it means to be human. It is quite reflective to read. I didn't find it life-changing. Again, I didn't really take too much from it. It was a good book. It was a decent book, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. So this is the book cover, and this was the granny square that I made. I really liked the colours. I thought they were quite representative, and it's a really funky little square. One thing I love about the blanket is how many different colours there are, that just sort of, they each represent a book and they are going together, and the thing that combines them is their meaning, I guess. Yeah. Book number 31, The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas by John Boyne. I finished this on the 22nd of May because I was listening to the audiobook version, or the CD version, and I gave it 3.5 stars. So growing up, I have seen the film many times. It always makes me cry, always. And I don't think I've ever read the book, so I was really intrigued to see if there were any differences, if the book ends the same way, if it's as graphic, if there was anything that was missing from the movie, etc. Because I know how the story goes, it was just intriguing. It was something that I had wanted to do. So in case you haven't read it, is a book about Bruno, a 11-year-old, I believe, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, in 1942 in Berlin. So he moves house and he is inadvertently next to Auschwitz, next to the camp. One day, whilst Bruno is exploring, trying to find something interesting to do in his new house, he meets Shmuel, who is a little boy, a Jewish boy who is the same age as him, and they start a friendship. Shmuel is in Auschwitz, and there's not a lot of understanding between them of their differences in life, and Bruno can't understand why he is on the other side of the fence, what he's done wrong, why he doesn't have any toys to play with, why he always wears pyjamas, etc., why he sometimes has bruises. So it's looking at Auschwitz through a very innocent perspective, which is just heartbreaking and so important as well. I wrote down that it's a heartbreaking depiction of children of war and their innocence. The ending is not as graphic, it's not as clear exactly what happens, it's more implied. I will say this book was very good and very important for people to know about, because it is a part of our history and it is a part that is very, very important and shouldn't be forgotten. In terms of the writing style, again, I don't know if this was done on purpose or not, but there were a few phrases that were just repeated and repeated. There was certain lines that were repeated through the book, and I found that a little bit difficult, although looking from the other side of... I found it a bit difficult because it was repetition and I don't particularly like repetition. However, looking at it from another perspective, he is a child and children do repeat themselves. So maybe that was an effect, maybe that was done on purpose by the author to just remind you that he is a child. So this was the book cover and this was the granny square. This was again really representative. I know that in the film they are shown to have black and white pyjamas, or like dark grey and white pyjamas, but the front cover of the book, it is grey and darker grey, and I think reflecting, I doubt that it would be sort of sparkling white and black or dark grey, because they would have been worn quite a lot and they wouldn't necessarily be the cleanest. So that was quite representative, and I was really happy that I could find some colours that pretty much exactly matched the front cover. And I was really glad that I read the story as well. So book number 42 was Dear Dolly by Dolly Alderton. Complete change. So I read this between the 22nd and the 25th. So the book is about Dolly Alderton, who used to be an agony aunt for a newspaper. And she has collected over the years a few of the more obscure agony aunt questions and a few of the more frequent ones as well. And she is answering their queries and being quite blunt at times, showing an outside perspective to maybe a quite complicated issue for someone. And sometimes when you look at things from the outside, they are much clearer and you know what needs to be done. It's just difficult to do. I didn't share a lot of the problems that these people had, but it was quite nice to hear Dolly's perspective and just take on her sort of views of life, and sometimes just seeing the simplicity of things from the outside does really help. I listened to the audiobook version, so Dolly was actually narrating the answers, which was quite interesting. She gave quite nice, friendly advice. Sometimes it was quite funny, and the advice that she gave sometimes was quite relevant and quite nice. So for example, she answered a query about how to love yourself more, how to look in the mirror and sort of love what you see a little bit more, by learning how to do things, advancing your hobbies, making yourself more than just what you look like, and just sort of going with the process of being this amazing person, and then sort of learning to love your body and what you look like sort of through the process. This was the book cover, and this was the granny square that I made. Just to note that I know that sometimes when I have the book cover on my phone, it's not necessarily as clear of the colours. However, I do try and capture them well, and I don't always have the books in paper format. Sometimes I do just have them on an audiobook that I listen to. Book number 43, Anne of Green Gables. Now, this was an adaptation from a graphic novel and is by L.M. Montgomery. I gave this book 1.75 stars and I finished this on the 26th of May. So the book is about Anne, who is a child who is adopted into a family who live in Green Gables. She is a very dreamy child and she is very expressive and she doesn't necessarily fit in. So it's about her experiences of adapting to where she lives and learning to love and becoming more of herself. And just because she's different, it doesn't mean that she's not lovable and that she is any less lovable, I guess. So because I listened to the adapted version, I would say it's not as good as the original version or the proper book. I have since seen quite a lot of quotes from the original book and it seems much more in depth. It seems a lot different to the version that I read. Obviously, I got the synopsis. I didn't necessarily get all the interesting details, all the important parts, the bit where she goes more in depth or where it's particularly difficult for her, etc. So that's the main feedback I'd give. This is the book cover with the square that I made. And the orange is adapted from her hair and the green is just Green Gables and sort of the front cover again. Book number 44 was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I finished it on the 29th of May and so far I haven't given it a star rating, but I will do. Sometimes I need to sit with the book a little while before I can give it a rating. So this is a book that's quite well talked about, the movie of which has come out recently as well. It is about Lily, who starts a relationship with Ryle, who is a neurosurgeon. In the beginning of the relationship, she meets someone from her past, a male named Atlas, and she reflects a lot about their relationship. The relationship between her and Ryle starts off well, and he starts off as nice, healthy, quite dreamy, but then it starts turning, so it doesn't turn unhealthy straight away. It is a little while after they've started dating and different circumstances make the relationship less healthy, put it like that. Ryle is or does become abusive towards the sort of middle to the end of the book. It is interesting to see a different perspective, and I think it's a really important book for a lot of people to read, especially if they have friends who've experienced domestic violence or control or abuse of any sort, or if they work with women or just in general, because it puts into perspective that the unhealthy partner or the abusive partner doesn't start off being abusive. They tend to start off being dreamy, and then a little incident happens that you can forgive them for, then it goes to dreamy, and then something else happens, and it just grows and grows and grows. And from someone who hasn't experienced that, I think that it's very easy to say that I would never be in that relationship. I would just leave. I would, just not even, if they hit me, I'd leave straight away. However, when you're in that situation, it is completely different. Obviously, there's a lot more in it. It's not just this stranger that's hit you. It's a relationship. You've started to get to know their friends, their family, their good qualities, and you live together. There's so much more complexity in it. They say sorry, you believe them. So something that I'm really passionate about is to learn more about sort of domestic violence and sort of promote that it's not a choice. And some of the good parts that were seen, there is a quote that I wrote down because I just loved it. See if I get it before my phone dies. So the quote that I really like: "People spend so much time wondering why the women don't leave. Where are all the people who wonder why the men are even abusive? Isn't that where the blame should be placed?" And I do appreciate that not all domestic violence is men against women, but predominantly it is. And I think just that little part of the book really stuck with me because it is so true. There is such a focus on why women don't leave that there is no focus left for the men or the women who are abusive to think, why are they abusive in the first place? Why do they think it's okay to hit someone? So yeah, that's my little rant over, but it was just so interesting to read and to go through. My mum read the book as well and she quite enjoyed it, and she said the same about getting a different perspective. So yeah, quite recommend. So this is the square that I made next to the book cover. The actual book cover that I got was the original one with what's it called? With an orchid on the front. It's very pink, so this goes more so with the book cover than with the newer book cover that you can see, but I still love it. And the last book that I read in May, finally I can take a breath, was Universal Love by Alexander Weinstein. I haven't given this one a rating yet either, but I really loved it, and I finished it between the 30th and the 31st of July. May. So this was a book that had short stories mainly about the future of technology. There were a few just about the future and just how different things could be affected in the future. It's very Black Mirror-esque. If you've ever seen Black Mirror, I would say it's very, very similar. I really enjoyed it. I found that the stories were easy to get through. It really makes you take a step back at times and think, could life actually be like this, or could technology actually advance that much? Probably can. For example, one story that stood out for me was a war game that you can play, and it's about a boy and his dad that are playing it. The boy starts playing it and dad says, under no circumstances are you to play the combat version, because that would involve you killing real people or, you know, actually going to war. So instead of being a game where you kill people in the game, there is also combat mode, which allows the player to control a drone, which then actively kills people. It takes out your steps, or it continues your steps. So that was quite eye-opening. The dad does end up doing a combat quest and does kill some players, and it makes him step back and reevaluate what he finds interesting, why he did it. And it's a very sci-fi book, but very recommended because it is just so interesting, so fascinating to think that this could be our future, potentially. But yeah, this is the book cover. And this is the granny square that I made. I really love the multicoloured yarn. I would love to know where it was originally from. Obviously, I don't know. So that is the end of my podcast. I have gone through 14 granny squares, just based on this month. 2 based on April, but predominantly based in May. Next month, again, I will be going through some more granny squares, the books that I read, and any other projects that I complete. So apart from that, I haven't got any projects on the go at the moment. I haven't got any works in progress. I haven't got any planned projects. I've got a few that I would like to do based on different books that I've been reading, but I haven't started them yet, and I will sort of leave them as a bit of a surprise for the coming month. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for spending this time with me, going over all of my different coloured granny squares and the projects that I have made apart from that. If there is anything particular that you would like to see in next episode or just in a future video, please drop the comment below. All links are in the description. And apart from that, I hope that you are well, and I will speak to you soon. I'll see you next week for another video. Take care, all the best, bye.